Okay, following on from last segment about starting well, let's talk about how much game design do we need to get started? And what does a good design document contain? Well, I'm not a game designer, but I am a game producer, so here's what I think about that from a producer's perspective. Once upon a time, there was a trend for lead designers to create an almighty game design document, or GDD as they were known. These huge Bibles of game design were supposed to contain every last piece of information needed to create the game. But as I talked about before, things change a lot in game development. And if you try to write it all down before starting, guess what? The game is still going to change, and the task of updating your huge GDD is also going to be huge. And guess what else? Human beings are not very good at reading hundreds of pages of design documents. So they don't. They just come and ask about it, or worse, make up new stuff instead. Since the days of the GDD, thankfully, teams have moved forward to far more flexible approaches. Yes, of course you need some written design, and the process of writing it down definitely makes you think through lots of aspects of how you want things to work. And while some of the game needs planning and thinking through before starting, not all of it does. For instance, your game might have 5 mini-games or side puzzles in it, but just knowing that is enough to get started. You can figure out the details as you go along. The other really cool thing that happened over the years is that software has become much cheaper, better, and easier to use. Designers can now use a whole range of tools to express their ideas by using a simple illustration, animation, short video, or simple 3D mock-up. They can more easily show what they were imagining than in the past. When a design is written down, it's important to focus on facts and try and think through some of the potential problems and details as you go. To do this, don't get stuck trying to solve it all on your own. Go and talk to people. Use the range of skills and knowledge on your team. You might find that something that seems complicated or unclear to you could be easily explained or cleverly solved by someone else. Here's an example of a seemingly simple 2D character walking side to side. Does the character always face the way they're walking, or do they turn? If they turn, how long does that take to do? Can they also walk backwards? Or how long is the character's stride? Can they go at different speeds? And what sounds do they make when they walk or run? If they reach a barrier, do they instantly come to a halt? Do they play a bump animation? What happens when they walk into an object that can be pushed? Can your character jump? If so, how high? Are all jumps the same height, or can you vary it? If the character can run, does that affect the jump distance? You can't answer all of these questions up front. You'll need to get a first version working in the game to see what else needs to be figured out. But thinking through as many aspects of a design as possible can help avoid problems later on. So, as I say, focus on facts and use a format that's easy to read, such as numbered or bullet-pointed lists, and break the information into logical sections. It's useful to include estimates for how long you think something should take to happen. It doesn't matter if you're wrong and need to change it, at least you gave a starting point. It's also useful to write down for a programmer what variables you might want to fiddle with, such as speeds, timings, distances, so they can write code that makes those things easy to edit. In terms of when you need to get your design finished by, well, I'll give you a clue. It isn't on the day that work is due to begin. Try and get your design done well ahead of when work is going to start, so there's time for everyone to check they're okay with it. Some other really important design stuff that you do need to figure out, and you will very likely need to do some tests in software prototypes for it, is the scale of stuff in your game. Here are 3 examples to think about. 1. If your game is a character game, how big is the character in the level? How big are doors, boxes, platforms, enemies, weapons, bosses, vehicles? 2. If your game is a strategy game, how big are the units? How large are the maps? Do the maps scroll around or fit on one screen? And 3. If your game is a flying game, how big is your craft on screen? How fast does it move? How big is the world? How big are enemies in the sky? And last but not least, when you've written the first version of your design document, make sure you send everyone a copy, ask them for their feedback, and set them a fair deadline to get back to you. If you're working in the same space, try and book a meeting to sit and read the design together. This is a bit like a script read-through in the movie industry, where everyone goes through the script together, does a rehearsal, and knocks off any rough edges so that it flows nicely when they film it. If you do this with your game design, you'll find people are much happier about building it than if you just expect them to get on with it without having a chance to discuss it first.